The awakening of the predators. The cellar was no longer a room, it was a rhythmic, pulsing lung. Rachel pressed her back against the damp, sweating stone of the foundation wall, her fingers clawing into the mortar until the nails snapped and bled. But the blood didn't just drip, it hummed. It was a golden, luminous frequency that she could hear, a frantic ticking clock inside her own veins. Rachel? The voice was a jagged piece of glass cutting through the roar of a hurricane. Sarah. Rachel tried to focus, but her vision was a fractured kaleidoscope. The world had lost its stability. The ambient darkness of the cellar wasn't empty, it was thick, textured, alive with the microscopic vibrations of dust motes dancing in the air. She could smell the manor, not the scent of rot, but the chemical composition of decay, the sour musk of the mold, the metallic tang of dry, ancient blood soaked into the earth centuries ago. Sarah. I can hear the walls, Rachel rasped. Her voice sounded alien, vibrating against her teeth like a tuning fork. She looked up, and the sight of her friend triggered a violent, involuntary shift in her biology. Sarah was hunched near the iron door, her skin slick with sweat, her eyes reflecting the dim, flickering bulb in the hallway like a cornered animal's. But it was the scent that hit Rachel like a physical blow, the rich, pulsing heat of the carotid artery in Sarah's neck. It wasn't just blood, it was life. A low, guttural growl vibrated in Rachel's own chest, one she didn't recognize. Don't look at me like that, Sarah whispered, her pragmatism warring with a frantic, animal terror. She was clutching her own stomach, her body twisting in a silent, agonizing spasm as her bones cracked and reset beneath her skin. Rachel, stay with me. If we lose it, if we give in to this, we're done. It's not a choice, Rachel hissed. Her skin felt too tight, a prison of parchment stretched over a furnace. The pain of the transformation was an exquisite, serrated blade. Every nerve ending in her body had been stripped bare and dipped in acid. She could feel the heartbeat of a rat scurrying inside the wall 3 feet to her left. She could feel the microscopic tremors in the foundation as the ocean tides pounded against the island cliffs outside. It was too much. The sensory overload threatened to shatter her mind into a million pieces. She lunged forward, not by intent, but because the hunger had become a gravitational force. Her hand shot out, claws, black, sharpened shards, tearing into the wood of a rotting support beam. The wood splintered with the sound of a gunshot. Rachel, stop. Sarah shouted, but the word was distorted, stretched out by the unnatural speed at which Rachel was perceiving time. Rachel didn't stop. She pushed herself off the wall, moving with a fluid, terrifying grace that felt nothing like her own limbs. She hit the center of the cellar floor, her center of gravity shifted. She caught her reflection in a shattered fragment of a mirror hanging near the workbench. The girl who had come to the island, the curious, thrill-seeking student, was gone. In her place was a creature of sharp angles and hollow, predatory hunger. Her eyes were burning, the irises eclipsed by a swirling, obsidian void. Her skin was deathly pale, translucent enough to see the violent, dark river of her changed blood surging beneath. The hunger was a physical weight, a hollow ache in her gut that felt like a starving mouth. It wanted everything. It wanted the moisture in the air, the vibration of the earth, and most of all, it wanted the warmth radiating from Sarah. I can't turn it off, Rachel gasped, her head thrashing back and forth as if trying to shake off a swarm of bees. She dug her fingers into her own scalp, the pain of her fingernails piercing her skin, grounding her for a fraction of a second. Sarah, you have to get away from me. I'm not leaving you, Sarah said, though her own voice had dropped an octave, losing its human pitch. She crawled toward Rachel, her movements twitching with the same erratic, lethal potential. Look at me, Sarah commanded, her voice trembling. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes locked onto Rachel's. Think about the manor. Think about Thorn. He did this to us. He's watching us right now, probably through some camera, waiting for us to rip each other apart so he can check a box on his sick little list. The name Thorn acted like a tether. It anchored Rachel to her rage, providing a target for the primal, explosive energy coursing through her. The hunger was still there, a feral beast scratching at the cage of her ribs, but the hatred was cleaner. It was sharper. He thinks we're his monsters, Rachel whispered, the growl subsiding into a shaky, jagged breath. Then show him how dangerous his creations are, Sarah replied. She stood up, her legs trembling but holding her weight with an impossible, wire-taut strength. She looked at her hands, then at the iron-reinforced door they had been thrown behind. We aren't dinner. We're the architects of his end. Rachel rose to meet her. The movement was instinctive, a predatory unfolding. She felt the power now, not just the hunger, but the raw, kinetic potential dormant in every fiber of her new physiology. She felt the shadow in the corner of the room, not as an absence of light, but as a tangible substance she could reach out and touch. She focused on the shadows pooling under the workbench. She pulled at them, a mental tug-of-war, and for a fleeting second, the darkness flickered and lengthened, swirling around her fingertips like smoke. I can feel it, Rachel whispered, the terror in her expression replaced by something darker, something colder. I can feel the manor's pulse, Sarah. It's not just stone and mortar. It's an extension of him. Then we cut the connection, Sarah said. She turned toward the heavy iron door, her eyes adjusting to the absolute darkness of the corridor beyond as if it were bathed in high noon. The hunger roared again, a cacophony of demands, but Rachel forced it down, burying it under a layer of ice. She felt her fangs, razor-sharp, throbbing with a phantom ache, and realized they were the only weapons she would ever need. They're coming back, Rachel said, her head snapping toward the ceiling. She could hear the faint, rhythmic thud of boots on the floorboards upstairs, 2 sets of boots, heavy and deliberate. The scent of them followed, the cloying, oily smell of old, stagnant blood and the sharp, metallic tang of the enforcer, Mark. Good, Sarah replied, a feral smirk touching her lips. I'm starving. They stood side by side in the cellar, 2 monsters reborn in the dark, waiting for the lock to turn. The threshold of their humanity had been crossed, and as the heavy bolt began to slide back, they didn't retreat into the shadows. They became them. The lock clicked, a heavy, mechanical sound that echoed like a funeral bell. The iron door groaned on its rusted hinges, swinging inward to reveal the oppressive gloom of the stone corridor. Standing in the threshold was Mark, his red hair a splash of arterial color against the monochromatic rod of the manor. Beside him stood a massive, hulking figure, Jack, whose silhouette seemed to absorb the dim lantern light like a sponge. Mark's gaze flickered over them, his lips curling into a predatory sneer that didn't reach his dead, glassy eyes. He held a high-definition remote control in one hand, the screen glowing with a faint, blue light, the feed to his precious, unseen audience. Look at that, Mark purred, his voice a dry rasp that grated against Rachel's hypersensitive ears. The transformation is complete. The transition phase yielded specimens far more vibrant than the last batch. Our subscribers are going to love this. Jack grunted, a sound of wet gravel, and stepped forward. He reached for the heavy leather collar hanging from his belt, his intent clear. They were to be leashed, dragged back into the theater of the Red Room to perform for the unseen eyes of the dark web. Rachel felt the shadow at her back respond to her internal spike of adrenaline. It didn't just lean, it surged, thick and viscous, coiling around her ankles like a loyal hound. You think we're specimens, Sarah said. Her voice was remarkably steady, stripped of the human tremors from moments ago. She stepped forward, her movement blurring, a flicker of motion that left a trail of after-images in the dim air. Mark's smile faltered. He moved to raise a stun baton, but he was far too slow. Sarah was already inside his guard. She didn't strike like a human, she struck with the force of a tectonic plate shifting. Her palm slammed into Mark's chest, the impact resonant and hollow, like a mallet against a dry casket. Mark flew backward, his spine slamming into the stone wall with a sickening crunch that vibrated through the floorboards. Jack roared, a sound of primal confusion, and lunged. He swung a meat-hooked chain, the jagged steel whistling through the air with enough force to decapitate. Rachel didn't flinch. She let the darkness she had been nurturing in the cellar erupt. The shadows in the hall didn't just expand, they solidified. A lash of pure, freezing nothingness whipped out from Rachel's hand, wrapping around the chain mid-swing. The metal shattered, not bent, but splintered into shards of rusted iron as the cold, magical entropy of the shadow turned it to brittle dust. Jack stared at his broken weapon, his monstrous, blood-starved eyes widening. In that split second of hesitation, Rachel was upon him. She moved with a terrifying, liquid agility. She caught his chin in one hand and his shoulder in the other, her strength amplified by the very entity that Thorn had tried to tether to her bloodline. She twisted. The sound was like a snapping branch, and the behemoth collapsed, his neck failing to support the weight of his own massive frame. "Check the cameras," Rachel commanded, her voice dropping into a register that made the air itself grow frigid. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She snatched the remote from Mark's limp, twitching hand. She didn't just turn it off. She drove her thumb through the screen, shattering the circuitry, then slammed the device into the stone floor, grinding it into metallic paste under her heel. "The feed is dead," Sarah announced, her eyes darting toward the staircase leading upward. "But Thorn is still in the house. I can smell him. He's upstairs, in the study." Mark groaned, trying to rise, his ribs visibly knitting themselves back together with an unnatural, wet sound. He lunged at Sarah's ankle, his fingers lengthening into needle-like claws. Rachel stepped on his hand, her boot crushing the fingers into the floor. She leaned down, her face inches from his, her eyes swirling with that same obsidian void. "You served him, Mark. You took our friends. You turned us into this." He's a god," Mark choked out, blood bubbling from his lips. "You're just footnotes in his story." "Then we're rewriting the ending," Sarah said. She reached down, not for a weapon, but for the life force still flickering in the creature. It was a dark, intuitive pull, a harvest. As she drew upon it, Mark's skin went gray, then white, then cracked like desert clay as the unnatural vitality Thorn had gifted him was sucked away. He shriveled, the light in his eyes vanishing into a vacant, hollow stare. Rachel stood, her breath hitching. The hunger, the one that had threatened to tear her apart minutes ago, was satisfied. Not by blood, but by the cessation of the master's hold on the servant. She felt stronger, sharper, the fog of the transition clearing to reveal a landscape of infinite, dangerous possibility. "Lyra said the manor is a nexus," Rachel said, looking at the stone walls. She could see the veins of magic pulsating beneath the surface now, a spider web of ley lines converging in the study above. "If he's feeding the entity through our bloodline, we don't just kill him. We collapse the floor beneath him." "Let's go," Sarah said, a chilling, resolute smile spreading across her face. They turned toward the stairs. They were no longer victims of Blackwood Manor. They were its new, apex predators, and the sorcerer at the top of the house was about to learn that when you build a cage for monsters, you should make sure the bars are unbreakable. They ascended the stairs, not with the trepidation of human girls, but with the silent, predatory grace of creatures who finally understood exactly what they were. The manor groaned as they moved, the structure itself seeming to recognize that its masters had changed. The hunt had begun.